5 million, the employer and ETF shall each retain 12% of the excess amount respectively. So that means when employer or ETF making this kind of payments to an employee at the time of retiring, at the time of the at the time of terminating his employment, if that if the payments are made under this category, 5 million should be, if that uh, total income exceeds 5 million, the employer shall retain 12% of the excess amount respectively. ඒ මොකක්ද ඒ කියන්නේ? මෙතන ජාති ගොඩක් කියවනේ A ඉඳලා F වෙනකන්. අන්න ඒව වලින් මේ කියන ජාති ටික මෙතන මේ කියන ජාති ගෙවනවා නම් employer කෙනෙක් හරි ETF එකකින් හරි employee කෙනෙකුට ඒ ගෙවන වෙලාවට ඒ ගෙවන එකේ වටිනාකම මිලියන 5කට වඩා වැඩි නම් ඒ වැඩි වෙන amount එකෙන් 12%ක් Taman ළඟ තියාගන්න කියනවා. මුළු ගානම ගෙවන්න නැතුව employeeට. What are those income? Amount payable in commutation of pension. Amount payable as a retiring gratuity. Amount received as compensation for loss of office or employment under a scheme which is uniformly applicable to all employees as approved by the Commissioner General of Inland Revenue. So for this approval should be obtained from the legislation unit of the Inland Revenue Department. So any sum payable from employees trust fund. So if they are making this kind of payment to employee, if that total amount exceeds 5 million, then on the balance amount, on the excess amount, 12% should be retained. Who? By the employer or the ETF. ඒ කියන්නේ employer හරි ETF එකකින් හරි අපි රිටයර් වෙන වෙලාවට අපිට මේ කියන જાතියේ payment කළොත් විතරක් මේ payment එක 5 මිලියන්ට වඩා වැඩි වෙනවා නම් ඒ වැඩි වෙන කොටසෙන් 12%ක් තියාගන්න කියනවා, රඳවා ගන්න කියනවා. ඇයි එම් කියන්නේ? මේ 12% තියාගෙන ඉතුරු ටික ගෙවන්න කියන්නේ ඇයි? බැරි වෙලාවත් මෙයාට මේ ප්‍රමාණයට මුළු ඔක්කොම දීලා තවදුරටත් tax liability එකක් අවසානයේදී calculate කරනකොට ගෙවන්න තිබුණොත් අන්න ඒක අය කරගන්න තමයි මේ 12% රඳවා ගන්න. So any provident fund mentioned in item B and all employers shall retain 36% on the following payments or benefits. එතකොට මේ මෙතන 2 වල කියපු ඒවා නම් payment නම් කරන්නේ මිලියන 5කට වඩා වැඩි වෙනවා නම් 12ක් තියාගන්න කියනවා. හැබැයි මෙන්න මේ මෙතන පහළ තියෙන જાති මේ මෙතන මේ තුනේ A ඉඳලා D වෙනකම් කරන payment නම් කරන්නේ සීමාවක් නැහැ. මේ payment වලින් 36ක් රඳවා ගන්න කියනවා. So why do we ask to retain 36%? Because 36% is the highest income tax, individual income tax rate. So in case, if there is an excess liability, we have 36% retained in the employer, he can deduct that amount from that amount. එතකොට 36ක් රඳව ගන්න කියන්නේ මොනාගෙන්ද? Compensation for loss of office or employment under a scheme which is not approved by the Commissioner General of Inland Revenue. So what is the difference between these two? Under this two, it says amount received as compensation but as approved by the Commissioner. ඒ කියන්නේ කොමසාරි ජෙනරල් approve කරපු compensation එකක් නම් ගෙවන්නේ uniformly applicable to all employees. නම් කන්සෙෂනරි රේට් එකේ මේව ටැක්ස් වෙනවා. ඉන්කම් ටැක්ස් රේට්ස් කතා කරනකොට අපි මේව කතා කරමු. ලෝවර් රේට් එකේ ටැක්ස් වෙන ಜಾති තමයි මෙතන තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපේ ආයතනයක ආයතන හිටපු ගමන් රීස්ට්‍රක්චර් කරනවානේ. රීස්ට්‍රක්චර් කරනවා, වර්කර්ස්ලා අඩු කරනවා. ඒ වෙලාවට කවුරුර එක්කෙනෙක්ට කතා කරලා ඔය අවස් කරනවා කියලා කිව්වොත් ඒ අස් කිරීම මත ලැබෙන කම්පන්සේෂන් එක ලෝවර් රේට් එකේ ටැක්ස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක ටැක්ස් වෙන්නේ මෙතන. ඒකයි මේ කියන්නේ not approved by the uniformly applicable. මෙතන මේ තියෙනවා uniformly applicable to all employees. වගේ ස්කීම් එකකින් නම් මේ කම්පන්සේෂන් එක දෙන්නේ. ඒ වෙලාවට විතරයි ලෝවර් රේට් ඇප්ලයි වෙන්නේ. එතකොට ආයතනවල මේ නිලද සේවකයෝ අඩු කරනකොට මේව ගැන සැලකිලිමත් වුණොත් සේවකීන්ට යහපතක් වෙනවා. දැන් ආයතනවල වැඩ කරන අය ඇතිනේ. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලෝ තමන්ගේ සේවකීන්ව අඩු කරන්න තීරණයක් ගත්තොත් මෙන්න මේ වගේ යුනිෆෝම්ලි ඇප්ලිකබල් ස්කීම් එකක් යටතේ කොමසාරි ජෙනරල් වරයා අනුමත කරපු ස්කීම් එකකට යටතේ නම් මෙයාගේ කම්පන්සේෂන් එක ගෙවන්නේ that employee is entitled to apply concessionary income tax rates for this income. Otherwise, it will be taxed at the normal rate. එතකොට මේවා අපිට ප්‍රැක්ටිකලිම වෙන දේවල්, ප්‍රැක්ටිකලි අපිට අත්දකලා තියෙන දේවල්, කම්පන්සේෂන් එකක් දෙනවයි කියලා සමහරලාට කට්ටිය එම්ප්ලොයිස්ලා එනවා lower rate apply කරන්න. හැබැයි බැලුවම මේක යාට පර්සනලි දුන්න එකක්. එතකොට ඒක ගන්න බෑ. එතකොට අර වගේ දෙන්න අවශ්‍ය නම් uniformly applicable Commissioner General approve කරපු එකක් වෙන්න ඕනේ. Then payments other than from a provident fund approved by the Commissioner General or regulated provident fund. That means if that provident fund is approved by the Commissioner General, then it is taxable under concessionary rate. No, it is exempt. It is exempt. Here, any amount paid from the provident fund approved by the CGIR, it is exempt. If that is not approved by the Commissioner General, then it is taxed under normal income tax rates. So concessionary rates also not applicable. Any other payment, retirement, non-cash benefits. So sometimes when we are retiring, that in the institute will provide us lot of benefits. So all benefits should be taxed at the normal rate. So what the employee do after receiving this kind of income? The employer should make the payment to that employee after retaining 12% of the excess of the amount out of this income, income provided under Part 2, number 2, item 2, or if that income is in under item 3, then 36% should be retained. So after that, that employee should obtain a tax clearance from the Inland Revenue Department within 90 days. Within 90 days, he should come to the department. He should hand over a request to the department to issue a clearance and direction. So there in the unit, we have a clearance and direction unit. From that unit, they should obtain a clearance direction within 90 days of the retention. So after that retention, they will issue a document. They should come to the department to obtain a clearance certificate from the department. Then the IRD will calculate all tax liabilities of that employee. Sometimes there may be other income that are taxable. So applying all income, they will calculate the tax liability within 90 days. And after that calculation, they will issue that direction to the employer. If there is additional tax liability, from that retention, they should pay that to the department. If employee not collected that direction within 90 days, then the employer should remit that total deducted amount to the Inland Revenue Department. So, before that, the employee should obtain clearance certificate from the IRD and should submit it to the uh, employee. Sorry, employer. Okay, we can move to the next one. Okay, now we are in table 4. Table 4 is applicable for the employment made to non-resident employees who are non-citizens in Sri Lanka. So this is for non-resident, non-citizen. So what is the difference between resident and non-resident? I think you can remember. For the resident, worldwide income is taxable in Sri Lanka. For the non-residents, only the income earned from on within Sri Lanka is taxable in Sri Lanka. So that is the difference between resident and non-resident. So this is for the non-resident, non-citizen. But when we are referring table 1, 2, those tables were applicable for non-resident citizens also, not only the resident employees and non-resident citizens. So this table is for non-resident, non-citizens. So what is the difference between non-resident citizens and non-resident, non-citizens? Non-resident, non-citizens and non-resident citizens. What is the difference between non-resident, non-citizen and non-resident citizen? For non-resident, non-citizens are not entitled for the personal relief. But non-resident citizens also, not only the residents, non-resident citizens also entitled for the personal relief. That is the difference between non-resident, non-citizen and non-resident citizen. In first, table 1 and table 2 is applicable for resident individuals and non-resident citizen individuals. So this table is applicable for non-resident, non-citizen employees. So for non-citizens, personal relief is not applicable. So because of that, when we are applying this table, you can see for the first slab, we cannot see that tax relief, or in the previous slides, in the previous tables, so in the previous tables, you can see for the first slab, it says deductible tax as nil because personal relief is applicable. But for the non-citizens, personal relief is not applicable. So that is why we have 6% of monthly regular profits from employment in the first slab. So here we have 88,333. So what is that amount? How do we calculate it? How do we calculate that 88,333? Okay. Do you know the tax slab? Do you know the tax slabs and the relevant tax rates? First, 1 million, 6%. The next 500,000, 18. The next 500,000, 24. Next 500,000, 30. The balance, 36. So, for the first slab, 6% is applicable for 1 million. 1 million is for 1 year. So, after dividing 1 million by 12, we will have 88,333. That means that is for the monthly slab. This is for the monthly slab. Applicable tax rate is 6%. So likewise, we have to apply this table for the non-resident, non-citizens. So you have given this calculation. And table also given. This table can be applied here. Less than 1 million, 6%. Because personal relief is not applicable for non-citizens. So you have given a computation. Read and calculate the tax liability of this non-resident person, non-resident, non-citizen employee. I can give you 5 minutes. Read this and try to calculate. Okay. Then this is the tax table applicable for non-resident, non-citizens. So example is given in this document. So you can calculate the tax liability. So this is Mrs. David. He's a non-resident, non-citizen employee. She is working in private company and her regular profits for each month is 250,000 from employment, including non-cash benefit, and such remuneration for April 20 will be paid. She will receive bonus 1 million lump sum payment. Also in further, she expects to be Sri Lanka till end of July 2025 for the assessment year. She will terminate the employment and expects to leave Sri Lanka at the end of July 2025. So this is the calculation. So you have given the table. Now you know how to calculate this Mrs. David's tax liability using the table. So actually මේ table වලින් ගණන් හදන්න ඔයගලන්ට එන්නේ නැහැ. But for your day-to-day requirement for the practical situation, I am explaining this. මොකද මේ වගේ ගණන් එන්නේ නැහැ විභාගෙට. කීයක්වත් ගණන් එන්නේ නැහැ. මම මේක පැහැදිලි කරන්නේ ඔයගලන්ට ඔයගලන්ගේ එදිනෙදා ඔයගලන්ගේ calculation එක කරනකොට කොහොමද මේ උනේ කියලා දැනගන්න. Okay. Now we can move to the next table. So this is table 5. Table 5 is for the cumulative gains and profits from employment. So this is important, this table, because this table is applicable for an employee who has their income less than the threshold in the beginning or within the year if they are retiring, or sometimes they are entering into the organization recruiting within the year of assessment, like that. So for that kind of employees, we are using this table. So it says, in deducting tax from monthly regular profits and gains from employment, tax table 1, 4, 6 or 7 should be applied appropriately. This table should be applied in respect of employees whose monthly regular gains and profits from employment is less than 150,000. So sometimes their income is less than 150,000, but after several months, cumulative gains and profits from employment will exceed 1.8 million. A year of assessment එක පටන් ගන්නකොට පොඩි ලක්ෂයක් කියමු තියෙන්නේ. පළවෙනි මාසයේ 2 3 ලක්ෂේ. ඊට පස්සේ එකපාරටම බෝනස් එකක් හම්බ වෙනවා 1.8 million exceed කරනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් සමහර වෙලාවට increment එකක් හම්බ වෙනවා මේ period එකේ exceed කරනවා යාගේ 1.8 million. So ඒ වගේ අවස්ථාවකදී we have to apply table 5. Sometimes some employees are commencing their employment, or sometimes they are retiring within the year of assessment. At that time also we should apply table 5. ඒ වගේ දේවල් වෙනවනේ කිසිම කෙනෙක් හරියට දවසට පටන් ගන්න දවසට ඉවර කරන්නේ. But within that period they can commence their employment or they can retiring within that period. So at that time we should apply table 5. So this is the table 5. For this table 5 also, we have personal relief in the first slab, relief from employment. But the calculation is little bit different when we are considering the previous calculations. So using this example, I can explain it. So Mr. Priyanta is an employee of a private company and his monthly regular gains and profits from employment is less than 150,000. But his cumulative gross regular profits from employment for the year, for the period from April 25 to February 2026 with bonus payment is exceeding 1.9 million. His new monthly regular gains now we are going to calculate that Mr. Jayanth's tax liability. So this is the formula, this is the method we have to calculate it. Now in the month of February, so for the month of February 2026, cumulative gross employment income from January 25 to February 26 is 1.9 million. Now it is exceeding 1.8 million. Tax to be paid in February 2026 as per tax table 5, that is 6,000 as per table 5. So we have given a table. So as per this table, that is 6,000. So in the after calculating February tax liability, then when we are calculating the March tax liability, we have to deduct February month liability because we are calculating it using that cumulative method. So because of that, earlier calculated tax amount should be deducted when we are calculating in the next month tax liability. So that is how we are moving from month to month up to the end of that year of assessment. But after that, we can use table 1 if he is liable for tax from the first month of that year of assessment. එතකොට මාසෙන් මාසෙට වෙන වෙනම ගණනය කරගෙන ගිහිල්ලා මේ calculation එක හදනවා. Okay. Now we can go to the table 6, schedule 6. So Schedule 6 is for tax on tax rates. Actually, this kind of things can happen for some authorities or companies. That means they bear their tax liability. That means the employer bear the tax liability of that employee. At that time, we can use this table. So for up to 150,000, that is a tax relief. So after that, we can apply tax rates relevant for each period. So that is not the 6%, but since it is a tax on tax, that means tax amount also should be included for that amount. So that is why we are applying the different rate for tax on tax rate. So this is also applicable for some companies. Some companies, they bear the tax liability of that employee. For an example, Mr. Silva, resident employee, works in a private institution. His monthly gross remuneration for the month of April 2025 was 300,000. His employer has undertaken to pay his tax without deducting from his remuneration. සමහරලාට අපේ ටැක්ස් එක වෙන කෙනෙක් අපි වෙනුවෙන් ගෙවන අවස්ථාවක් තමයි මේ. So government organizations are prohibited of doing this kind of things, but some private companies can do this kind of things, we call it tax on tax, because the payment of tax by the employer is also a benefit of that employee. Because of that, we call it tax on tax table. So for that tax on tax table, we have several tax tables. For the regular profits, we have one tax table. For the lump sum payment, we have separate tax table. And for the secondary employment also, we have separate tax table. So if that employee is employer, bear the tax liability of that employee at that time. For all situations, table 6 should be applied. Okay. Now we are moving to table 7. Now we are moving to table 7. Table 7 is for the deduction of tax from secondary employment. So I think you can remember, uh, for the primary employment, we applied table 1 or 2 or 3, no, 3, not 3. Table 1 and 2 we applied for primary employment, because when we are applying table 1 and table 2, we allow tax relief, personal relief. So for a person, for one person, tax relief can be deducted only once. So if we are applying table 1 for the secondary employment also, that means we are deducting tax relief twice. So because of that, we are applying table 1 for the primary employment, but for the secondary employment, we are applying table 7. කවුරු හරි කෙනෙකුට employment එකට වැඩිපුර තියෙනවා නම් එකකට විතරයි primary table 1 apply කරන්නේ. For all other employments, we have to apply table 7. So rates are given under table 7 for the secondary employment. It says, for the resident employees, we have given a separate rates. So rates for the secondary employment, the employee should give the declaration to the employer saying that that the employment is the secondary employment. And in that declaration, the employee should mention the relevant applicable tax rate for the primary employment. Here, so based on that amount, secondary employer can deduct tax from that employee. If the aggregate of monthly gains and profits from primary and secondary employment is less than 150,000, then applicable rate is 0, because this is less than the threshold. Then, if the aggregate of monthly gains and profits from primary and secondary employment is higher than 150,000 and less than 233,333, applicable tax rate is 6%. So for the application of this 6%, the secondary employer should know in which category, in which slab they are in for primary employment. So because of that, in the secondary employment declaration, they should mention in under which category, under which slab they are in. So if the aggregate of monthly gains and profits from primary and secondary employments higher than this amount, the applicable rates are determined as below. If that is more than that amount, the rates should be identified like this. If monthly gains and profits from primary employment under these categories, then these are the applicable tax rates for 0 to 156%. Likewise, the rates are given. So, considering the value of the primary employment, we should determine the relevant tax rates. So, because of that, to determine the relevant tax rate under secondary employment, yes, madam, should table 7 be applied on directors' sitting allowance, considering non-executive directors as secondary employment? It depends on that director. That means if that director considers this as a secondary employment, at that time we can apply table 7. If suppose this is his only one employment, then we can apply table 1 because we don't know whether this is his primary employment or secondary employment. It is up to that director. So you have given this example. Mrs. Jayanta is a resident employee of a private company and her regular monthly profits from employment is 250. Further, she gets a monthly fixed payment of 100,000 from company B as a secondary employment. Tax liability on a secondary employment should be computed as follows. As her income from primary employment rupees 250 falls under income range of the second range, that is the applicable tax rate on secondary employment is 24%. So based on the primary income slab, we can identify the relevant rate for secondary employment. It is a one step is up. පළවෙනි එකේ 0 ඉඳලා 150 වෙනකන් තිබුණේ 0යිනේ. හැබැයි මෙතන 0 ඉඳලා 150 වෙනකන් 6යි. ඒ වගේ එක ස්ලැබ් එකක් උඩට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. මේක 100%ම නිවැරදිම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද practically බලනකොට මේකේ පොඩි ගැටලු තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. But this is the rate applicable for secondary employment. So read and try to understand the second example. Okay. So this is the calculation of secondary employment. For if that person is a non-resident employee, at that time we have given a 36% tax rate because whether he is a resident citizen or not, if that person has a non-resident employee has employment income, at that time we applied 36% on that secondary employment. So this is the table for secondary employment. Then we can move to the last table. This is a new table. So this table is for the employee who has received income from foreign employer. That means when we are receiving employment income from our local employer, at that time we can instruct that employer to deduct taxes in respect of the act administered by the Inland Revenue Department. But here, this table applies to resident employees who are physically present in Sri Lanka but work remotely for a foreign employer. So this person is physically present in Sri Lanka. That means he is working in Sri Lanka but work for remotely for a foreign employee. That means a payment will receive from another country, but that person is physically in Sri Lanka. And this table does not apply to independent service providers and freelancers as their income is considered as business income. So one of the student asked that question. So this is not applicable for service providers or freelancers because that income should be considered as business income. So these tables are applicable only for the employees. This table applies subject to the fulfillment of all following conditions. So these conditions should be fulfilled to be deducted withholding taxes. The employer must be a person completely outside Sri Lanka. That means he cannot have a Sri Lankan permanent establishment. ඒක වෙනමම කතාවක්. ශ්‍රී ලංකා permanent establishment එකක් කියනවා කියන්නේ පිටරට ඉන්න කෙනෙක්ට ලංකාවෙත් ආයතනයක් තියෙන අවස්ථා. එතකොට complete එහෙම ලංකාවේ එකක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒකෙන්නේ tax එක ගෙවන්න. එතකොට එයා ලංකාවේ කෙනෙක් වෙනවා. But we are considering an employer who has no permanent establishment in Sri Lanka. The employee's service must be utilized outside Sri Lanka by the employer. So that means normally we have some employees, they are providing their services to outside Sri Lanka and that service must be utilized outside Sri Lanka. Payments to the employee must be received in foreign currency and remitted through a bank to Sri Lanka. So they are sending, the employer send that person's remuneration to that employee through a bank in Sri Lanka. So these conditions should be fulfilled for the application of table 8. So in the normal situations, In the normal situation, when employer making the payment to employee, at that time, employer deduct taxes from that payment. But in this case, employer is a person outside Sri Lanka. So he is not in Sri Lanka. Therefore, that employer will fail to deduct a bit because we cannot ask him, instruct outside persons to comply with the Sri Lankan law. අපිට පුළුවන් ද පිටරටක ඉන්න මිනිස්සුන්ට කියන්න අපේ රටේ නීති apply කරන්න කියලා. No, we can't do it. The employee must comply with the requirement by making the due tax payment. So because of that, that tax should be deducted by the employee himself and it should pay to the department. The payment must be made to the employee's taxpayer identification number and the type for this purpose is individual income tax. So because of that, employee should deduct taxes on behalf of his income, on behalf of himself. But in the normal condition, normal situation of the appit is paid by some other person and at that time payer should deduct. But in this case, employee should deduct it by themselves. So these are the applicable tax rates up to 1.8 million relief, exceeding 1.8 million but not exceeding 2 million 6%, then exceeding 2.8 million 15% because this is the 15% is the maximum tax rate applicable for this kind of income. That means income received from outside Sri Lanka, service rendered to be utilized outside Sri Lanka, and remittance should be received in foreign currency through a bank. If a person received that kind of income, so employment income is also a part of that income. That is also part of the services. So if an employee provides services to a person outside Sri Lanka to be utilized outside Sri Lanka, at that time, that kind of income should be taxed at the rate of maximum rate of 15%. So they can apply this table 8 and based on that amount, they should deduct and pay by themselves. So there is an example. So according to this example, tax should be deducted. So this is Mr. Kasun Meedenia is a software developer who was directly recruited and works remotely for a UK-based company. He stays in Sri Lanka and develops software based on instructions received from the foreign company. He receives a monthly remuneration of $6,000 and a bonus of $10,000 in the month of October. So based on this table, he should calculate his tax liability. So foreign currency, he receives foreign currency, but we cannot calculate tax liability using that foreign currency. We should convert it into the Sri Lankan rupees, and using that Sri Lankan rupees, we have to calculate the tax liability. So up to 1.79, that is tax free. Then from cumulative employment is there. So for that cumulative employment, 15% rate is applicable because it exceeds that 2.8 million. So 15% rate is applicable. So from that amount, the previously paid amount can be deducted. Here in this case, previously deducted amount, therefore no deduction. So after that, for the month of June, again for the cumulative amount, we have to calculate total for that total tax liability, and the up to that level, that slab, there is a tax already deducted. That deducted amount can be removed from the total tax liability. Likewise, from the beginning to the up to the end of that period, he can calculate the tax liability. So this is the way of applying table 8. So using these tables, employer can deduct their tax liability of employees except table 8. Uh, and after that, they should pay that deducted amount for each month, deducted amount for each month in the succeeding month to the department. And after April, before April 30th, they should submit their tax return to the Inland Revenue Department. So that is the obligation of that employer. Employer should make that payment to the department like that, and they should submit their returns. Actually, for the calculation of this uh, liability, actual the date we are that person receiving that amount should be considered for the conversion. Okay, actually, I am not aware about the attendance list of the students. So you can do as you mentioned. That means I don't know in the normal how you are doing marking your attendance list. So you can do it as how you are doing in another days. If Kalhari can pick your numbers from the chat box, it is okay. I'm sorry, I don't know how she's obtaining that details. කල්හරි මේ කට්ටියගේ attendance list එක දාලා නැහැ කියන ඔයා වෙන්දට එහෙම දානවද කොහොමද කරන්නේ? Okay. Okay. Okay, Miss Kalhari will share the attendance list to the group, so you can update it. Okay, then so we can finish the employment income, and from in the next lesson we can start business income. I will share the relevant reading materials with you. So employment income tax calculation will be given for the midterm examination. Therefore you should calculate tax liability of an individuals. So I think you can obtain some past papers from the LMS. You can check with Miss uh, Kalhari. Then definitely there will be mm, some calculations with regard to the vehicle benefit, housing benefit, and including all cash and non-cash benefits. So you should know what are the taxable, what are the exempt amounts, what are the excluded items likewise. So you should read very carefully. The all reading material should read. In addition to that, try to calculate some mm, tax liability of individuals in the past papers. So I think you can obtain it from LMS or not. I will share some calculation with you in the next week. අපි බලමු චුට්ටක් calculations කීපයක් කරමු individual employment income එක ගැන. ගොඩක් දේවල් තාම කරන්න තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ because still up to now we have only finalized employment income. So in the next week we can start, next week or in this Friday we can start business income. After that we have to finish investment income. Then we can calculate tax liability of an individuals and companies. So we can do it later. I think your mid examination will be in November. So you should prepare for that mid examination also. So I'm not going to give you a total tax calculation of an individual or a company. That means only business income, and only employment income, and investment income questions can be included. Let's I will try to finish some part of the investment income before that midterm examination, because business income has more deduction rules. So we cannot finish all deduction rules before November. So because of that, I cannot give you I cannot give you questions regarding the business income, only employment income and investment income if we can finish in employment income. But but normally we are starting from employment, then business income and the investment income. If we cannot start that investment income prior to that midterm examination, we will do the examination only from the assessable income from employment. So that is my target. මොකද employment income එකට පස්සේ investment කරන්නත් බෑ. business income එක කරන්නේ නැතුව, deduction rules also there. It takes several weeks to finish business income. After that we can start investment income. So because of that, for the midterm examination we can calculate only assessable income from employment up to that level. I will, yes, we can do some examples, accessible income calculations prior to that midterm examination. මොකද midterm එකට කලින් අපි ගණන් කීපයක් වගේ හදන්න උත්සාහ කරමු. එතකොට ඔයගලන්ට employment income එකෙන් කරන්න පුළුවන්. නැත්නම් business income එකත් ඉවර කරලා මිட் කරන්න බෑ. ඒක ටිකක් දිගයි. එතකොට නොවැම්බර් month එක වෙනකොට business ඉවර කර income එක ඉවර කරන්න අමාරුයි අපිට. මේ මොනොත් අපිට end year end examination එකට තමයි business income එක දාලා total tax liability එකක් calculate කරන්න පුළුවන්. So because of that, I think we can do only for the assessable income of employment income for the mid-examination. Let's try. හරි. එහෙනම් අදට අපි ක්ලාස් එක නවත්තමු. මම හිතන්නේ අපිට අර මට්ටමට තමයි කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. මොකද මිඩ් එක නොවෙම්බර් තියෙනවා නම් අපිට ක්ලාසස් කීපයක් ඉවර කරන්න වෙන්නේ නොවෙම්බර් වෙනකොට. එහෙම වුණොත් අපි ඉදිරි කරමු. අපි ගණන් කීපයක් හදමු. ගණන් කීපයක් හදලා බිස්නස් ඉන්කම් එක පටන් අරගෙන ගණන් කීපයක් හදමු මිඩ් එක්සෑම් එක ලඟ වෙනකොට. හොඳයි. එහෙනම් අදට අපි ක්ලාස් එක නවත්තමු. අද බ්‍රේක් එකක්වත් ගන්න නැතුව එක දිගටම ක්ලාස් එක කරපු නිසා ටිකක් මහන්සි වැඩි. එහෙනම් okay. We can stop the session today. Next Friday we will have the session. Then good night. November 15 is midterm exam. Okay. November 15th means we have only few weeks. November 15. 2, 3, another 3. Okay, thank you very much. And good night to all of you.
Good night, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Good night, madam.